Hello, my dear students. It's a pleasure to meet you in our educational program of Geology and Environmental Sciences. In our today's episode, we'll talk on the second part of the Environmental Sciences syllabus. Let's start with the following. The problem of resources depletion. Avoiding grow one crop for 2 consecutive years and follow the crop rotation system. Depletion of natural resources. Depletion of resources and destruction of the environment became an urgent problem that should be faced to stop it and to remedy its effects. There are several aspects of depletion and squanderance of the resources, such as erosion and changing the forests and the agricultural lands into urban areas, and the effect of these on the existing of the living species. My dear students, we will discuss this in the following. We start with the depletion of natural renewable resources. The interaction between man and the environment is as old as the appearance of human race on the planet Earth, since the settlement of man in the environment. It satisfied his needs and desires as a result of trying to satisfy the different human needs. With the high increases in population, stress on the environment has been acute, and this stress on the environment was increased by the depleting its resources. Scientists has become aware of this harmful effect of misusing the resources. Scientists became aware of the harmful effect of the misusing the resources of the environment and realized the necessity of economizing and its consumption. In fact, man exploited the environment resources extravagantly to the extent that some of it are about to be depleted. Man started to suffer from the direct and indirect effect of his misuse of the natural resources. In the following, we'll discuss some of these depletions. Let's start with depletion of the agricultural soil. As you know, my dear students, the agricultural soil in Nile Valley was built thousands million of years by the immortal river carrying clay that it bring from the Ethiopian mountain. The ancient Egyptians used to cultivate the land only once a year after the flood of the Nile. We now make lots of mistakes that cause the depletion of the agricultural soil. The generalization of planting a single crop in the same soil year after year. This led to the weakening the soil and depriving it from some nutrients elements of the plant. The use of the manufactured chemical fertilizers instead of organic fertilizers led to the deterioration of the soil by changing its physical characteristics and made it more liable to erosion. Also, the overuse of pesticides led to the disappearance of some useful insects and that feed on harmful ones, leading to the later become agricultural pests. Pesticides results in the loss of nodular bacteria that are important for fixing the atmospheric nitrogen and the death of earthworms that aerate the soil and make nitrogen available. The agricultural land in Egypt was exposed to a big destruction process where the manufacture of red bricks is formed from the upper layer of the agricultural land soil. The dredging unfit soil formed during millions of years at time stayed devoted to increase agricultural area. Also, the dredging process that take a soil dimension, if coupled with the construction of the high dam, has with led deposition of silt and soil in the valley. My dear students, we have another distraction for the environment and making the resources limited, like the spreading of urbanization. Since the beginning of this century, the population in Egypt increased greatly to the extent that the rate of the population growth became more than 1.25 million annually. The increase in population resulted in the increase in the needs for food, clothing, and housing, besides the needs for services such as building schools, hospitals, and others. In order to make food available, the government started projects of agricultural reform formed for thousands millions of years, and thus the urban areas are increased on the expense of surrounding agricultural land. Thus we can say that in return for the reclamation area with the help of the high dam, the Egyptian persons have squandered rich land that was producing much more in spite of high cost of land reclamation. The spread of urbanization over the cultivated land has been responsible for the loss of almost 30,000 feddan of our limited agricultural land annually. The treatment of the problem of soil depletion. We have to avoid growth on one crop for 2 consecutive years and follow the crop rotation system. Regulating the use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides. Agriculture waste is converted to organic fertilizers. Converting organic matter in garbage into organic fertilizers. Brick manufacturing from shale, cement, sand, and other materials instead of the agricultural soil. Establishment of new cities in uncultivated desert land and the establishment of industrial projects. Providing facilities, housing, school, and various services in new cities. The use of synthetic fibers instead of cotton to provide land to grow grain. Issuing laws that prohibits depletion of agricultural land. Issued state legislation that prohibit building on agricultural land. My dear students, let's go to overcutting of trees. Trees have several benefits to the environment. In industrial areas, it acts as a natural screen for carbon dioxide, besides providing us with oxygen. In agricultural areas, besides the previous effects, it acts as windbreakers for protecting the other plants and providing shade and wood. In the forest, it sheds its leaves periodically. These shedded leaves decomposes, forming humus, which nourishes the soil and keeps its fertility. Also, it ensures almost a constant temperature for wild animals, which find in the forest a shelter and a suitable place for life. Forests are renewable resources. When man cut lots of its trees to get both wood and cellulose necessary for paper and textiles industry, the overcutting of the forest trees in the Middle East and North Africa led to the deterioration of the environment in these areas and moving towards drought. This is very clear in North Africa and the Middle East, where one notices clearly the effect of drought on the natural vegetation and the cultivated areas and on the life of man. My dear students, the negative effects of the overcutting of trees. Also, we have many problems and depletions for the natural resources as the forests. We have reduction in the amount of raw materials necessary for the many industries such as wood, industrial fibers, and paper. Also, we have vanishing of the animals that live in the forest and the destruction of their ecosystem. We have also weakening the soil due to its exposure to drought conditions. Also, exposing the area around the overcut forest to floods. We have temperature rise due to increased carbon dioxide and the limitation of the ecosystem. So how can we treat this problem, the treatment of the overcutting of trees? If we cut the trees in a certain area of the forest, we should plant instead new trees, thus conserving the forest as an ecosystem with the most stable one. Expansion in the cultivation of trees around the cities, establishing a green belt for each city. We can use the agricultural and industrial wastes substitute for wood. My dear students, let's go to another kind of depletion, which is overgrazing. You know, natural grazing fields provide food for cattle, herbs that man raise and depend on an animal wealth that provides him with protein nutrition. Overgrazing leads to the deterioration of the natural vegetation, which is always accompanied with the depletion of the soil and the local weather. If the deterioration occurs repetitively, the soil erodes and then become liable to severe erosion by the rain water and wind. At last, these grazing lands become arid lands unable to absorb rainwater, and the soil gets dry, especially at the slope due to its inability to absorb rainwater. The negative impact of the overgrazing, demise of plants suitable for grazing, and the survival of the other plants find them an opportunity for growth and proliferation. Also, degradation of natural vegetation, which always accompanied soil and local climate degradations. Emergency of the erosion and subjected to severe soil erosion by wind and rainwater. Soil dry, barren lands became unable to absorb rainwater, especially on slopes. The deserts spreading phenomena, desertification, as happened in the North Coast region in the earlier Roman time. Grazing in the grass areas erodes the vegetation, and the dominance of unusual species with short life cycle, where animal cannot eliminate them. When grazing is organized, grass growth rate is more than that rate of consumption. This organized animal grazing will be beneficial in reducing the rate of transpiration and evaporation by removing plants of the short and shoot systems. The grazing area of trees and shrubs causing an increase in the number of trees as a result of the removal of weeds that compete for water. My dear students, what about the examples of degradation of natural grassland? We have this in the northern coast overlooking the Mediterranean Sea that was used in sheep grazing in the past but has been deteriorated, and it is dry today as a result of overgrazing and the increase of population. Also, we have another example in the Saudi desert. They have suffered from overgrazing through several centuries. It was transformed from an area covered with natural vegetation capable of regenerating itself continuously to deteriorated areas. Consequently, the country lost large areas of grazing land. My dear students, what about the treatment of this problem? We have to establish fish farms and crustaceans to provide protein. Also, conversion of agricultural wastes to feed. Conversion of byproduct of some industries to feed industry. The overhunting of wild animals, it is another problem of resources depletion. My dear students, sometimes we hear about a lake or a river that become void of fish, or that a species of fish disappeared from the sea. As a matter of fact, 45 species of birds disappeared in the 19th and 20th century due to the chasing them with nests and advanced weapons. In these 2 centuries, about 45 species of mammals becomes extinct too. The disappearance of animal is due to killing or hunting a group of it to extent that the remaining ones are very few in number, thus unable to continue reproduction. Wild animals are hunted or killed to be used mainly as food. Besides, others are reasons, like sometimes they are used to provide clothes, as in the case of the fur animals, the main examples. Also, the first Americans have killed millions of American buffaloes, the beacon. So how can we solve the problem of overhunting of wild animals? Establishment of natural reserves to preserve the rare species threatened with extinction. Establishment of fish and shellfish farms to provide proteins. Issuing a law to criminalize hunting for specific types and seasons, and in certain age to allow their reproduction. raising awareness of the importance of wildlife protection and participation in the international conventions, rationalization of trees cutting and animal hunting in land and sea. My dear students, let's go to another depletion, which is the overconsumption of water. Fresh water represents only 1% of the surface water in the earth, since sea and ocean water represent 97% and the ice at the pool represent 2%. This means that the amount of fresh water is very limited. The life of the living organisms in the biosphere depends on this limited amount of fresh water. So in Egypt, we depend on the river Nile. Also, some other African countries depend on it. Thus, agreements were signed allocating certain amount of the Nile water to each country. Despite that, we are extravagant in using this water through irrigation by submersion and the unwise human use. If we add to this the increased number of consumers during the increase of the population, we realize the need for economizing on the consumption through irrigation by dripping and the wise person use of water. Thus we can use what we save from the river water for new cultivating areas. Rationalizing the water consumption and contaminations. Avoiding irrigation by submersion and using spraying or dripping methods for water saving. Saving water use it in land reclamation. Avoiding water squandering in personal use. Searching for new sources of water as underground water and water desalination. My dear students, let's go to this question: how can we solve the problem of water contamination and overconsumption? Rationalizing consumption through dripping or spray irrigation and use saved river water in cultivating new areas. Avoiding the water wasting in personal use and the use of tape infrared to save water. Also, we can recycle the used water in irrigation, timber trees. We can search for underground water suitable for irrigation and personal use and desalination of the seawater and using drained rainwater. My dear students, how can we combat pollution of the Nile? Determining the allowed proportion of populations on the Nile River. Choice of pesticides and fertilizers that do not pollute water channels. Requiring factories by treating industrial wastes and wastewater before discharging into the Nile. Continuous inspection of the water channels and removes of the causes of pollution. Now, my dear students, let's go to the depletion of natural non-renewable resources like mineral depletion. Minerals are non-renewable resources that man exploited in different aspects of his life activities. We all know the use of iron, copper, aluminum, zinc, gold, platinum, and others that are found in the Earth's crust. But with population increase and progress of technology, the individual share of the mineral increased. Studies shows also the amount of minerals remaining in the earth is disappearing rapidly. This supports the idea that we should find a substitute for minerals. Scientists recommended the recycling of minerals through melting the manufactured metals that are no longer suitable for use and reshaping it. My dear students, by this we come to the end of our today's program. Until we meet next time, have my best wishes and goodbye.